Okay, today's video, we're going to dive deep into 3 extremely intriguing and mysterious UFO encounters in Iran. You may be aware of the 1976 Tehran incident with General Parviz Jafari. We'll go through that in detail. But you may not be aware there were also 2 other events, 2004 nuclear site interactions where fighters were again launched to suspicious activity around a nuclear site, and then again in 2012 when an actual F-14 exploded during the Intercept. So these are amazing accounts, again, not in the US. Thanks for being here. Remember to like and subscribe, please. Really helps the channel. Chris Lado, welcome to Lado Files.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Parviz Jafari, and I'm a retired general of Iranian Air Force.
So General Jafari has spoken many times about this. He's outspoken on it. But I think the clearest account comes from his chapter that he wrote, Chapter 9, in Leslie Kean's amazing book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. Hopefully she is cool with me reading it out here, but there's many other stories in that book. Highly recommend you check it out. So this is just one of the stories. So from General Jafari. At about 11 p.m. on the evening of September 18, 1976, citizens were frightened by the circling of an unknown object over Tehran at a low altitude. It looked similar to a star, but bigger and brighter. Some called the air traffic control tower at Mehrabad Airport, where Hussein Perozi was the night supervisor in charge. After receiving 4 calls, Perozi went outside and looked through his binoculars in the direction people had reported. He saw it too, a bright object flashing colored lights and changing positions at about 6,000 feet up. It also appeared to be changing shapes. Perozi knew there were no planes or helicopters in the vicinity that night. At around 12:30 a.m., he alerted the Air Force Command Post. Deputy General Yousefi, who was in charge at the time, walked outside, and he also saw the object. He decided to scramble an Air Force Phantom 4-2 jet from Shakraki Air Base, located outside of Tehran, to investigate. The F-4 carried 2 people, Captain Kean and First Lieutenant Shokri, the navigator. I was a major and the squadron commander at the time, and one of my pilots, who was among the first men alerted in the area, took off immediately. I left my house and headed for the base in order to be responsive to the operation there. Okay, so interesting points I thought so far is that he was the squadron commander at the time. And I realize, extremely credible, and it really takes the leaders of these organizations to actually see the objects, right? You have David Fravor that saw it. He was the squadron commander as well. It really takes the leaders to see it because they have the authority and they've been given really the credibility to go and see these things and actually talk about them, right? People are going to believe the squadron commander. Other interesting thing is that it was at low altitude. A lot of the debunkers say that these are planets or it was some sky phenomenon. Jupiter, I think I heard, was one of them. And that's just not going to be the case, right? If you have so many reports, people seeing them with binoculars, so many different people seeing with binoculars, and then we'll see here the pilots see it. So there's an amazing case with just so many witnesses. Okay, Jafari continues. The F-4 was up when I arrived at the base, and both Kean and Shokri had seen the object and were attempting to chase it, but it was moving close to the speed of sound, so they couldn't catch it. When they came within a closer distance to it, all of their instrumentation went out, the radio was garbled, and they lost communication. After the F-4 moved away again, he regained all the instruments and could resume communications. Okay, I thought this was just amazingly interesting. Okay, you hear about cars shutting off, electronics shutting off, cameras not working when they are close to these UFOs, right? Possibly because they're emitting some sort of crazy magnetic fields. The UFOs that shut down the 10 ICBMs underground, for instance, another amazing example. What's interesting here, though, is the debunkers say that the F-4s obviously have these communication issues. So it was just a radio malfunction, and a maintainer said before that jet had an issue. But we'll see here in this case, both F-4s, so multiple F-4s, had the same issue. And it was really in relation to how close they were to these objects. So when they got closer, their radios were totally garbled. staticed it out, and even their electronics and instrumentation stopped working. But when they left, then all their instrumentation, everything went back to normal. And then when they approached the UFO again, they had the same effects. So that's just amazing to me and really shows that it's related to the objects. Again, you have multiple F4s and multiple pilot-navigator couples. Okay, so now Jafari is launched. He continues. About 10 minutes later, I was ordered to take off in a second jet to approach the object, which I was piloting. It was now about 1:30 a.m. on September 19th. First Lieutenant Demirian, my second pilot in the backseat, operated the radar and other equipment. We called him the backseater. When we took off, the object looked just like what had been reported. It was so brilliant, flying at a low altitude over the city, and then it started climbing. Captain Kean had approached the Russian border, and at that point he was told to turn back. When he turned around, he said that he could see the object in front of him at 12 o'clock. I said, "Where exactly do you see it?" He said, "Over the dam, close to Tehran." I told him, "You go home, I'll take care of it." As he headed back, I looked over, and then I saw it. It was flashing with intense red, green, orange, and blue lights, so bright that I was not able to see its body. The lights formed a diamond shape, just brilliant lights. No solid structure could be seen through or around them. The sequence of flashes was extremely fast, like a strobe light. Maybe the lights were only one part of a bigger object, which we couldn't see. There was no way to know. Okay, that description is unbelievable, right? And is obviously not a planet. It's obviously not Jupiter. Or also heard a debunking argument. It is meteors, right? That was the Perseids meteor shower was going on then. This is low level over Tehran. So he's looking, not that far above the horizon and seeing a diamond shape of all these different colors, just brilliant lights, extremely fast strobing light. So I don't know what else that could be. All right, Jafari continues. I approached and I got close to it, maybe 70 miles or so in a climb situation. All of a sudden, it jumped about 10 degrees to the right. In an instant, 10 degrees. And then again, it jumped 10 degrees. And then again, I had to turn 98 degrees to the right from my heading of 70 degrees. So we changed position 168 degrees toward the south of the capital city. I asked the tower whether they had it on radar. The operator replied, "The radar is out of order. It's not operational right now." All of a sudden, my backseater, Lieutenant Demirian, said, "Sir, I have it on radar." I looked on the radar screen and saw the marker. I said, "Okay, break lock and repaint it." This was to make sure it wasn't a ground effect or a mountain that we were picking up on the radar. We now had a good return on the screen, and it was at 27 miles, 30 degrees left. Our closing speed was 150 knots and in a climb. We kept it locked on with radar. The size on the radar scope was comparable to that of a 707 Tinker. At this moment, I thought this was my chance to fire at it. But when it, whatever it was close to me, my weapons jammed and my radio communications were garbled. Okay, so first interesting point is they are able to get it on radar, and a tanker is a very large radar target. Okay, so the size of an actual target that shows up is really based on its radar cross-section. Okay, so you could have a small aircraft that actually has a large radar cross-section that has a bunch of pointy areas and the materials aren't good, or you can even have a B-2 bomber, right, a very large aircraft, which through its design and materials is able to have an extremely small radar cross-section. So we don't really know how large the UFO was, but it basically was returning enough radar energy to be equivalent to a 707 Tinker, which is quite large. We can see them, at least in an F-16, out to 120 miles even. But the one point is, even though the ground radar wasn't working, the air radar was working, and they were able to paint it. Also interesting is he says, "I thought this was my chance to fire at it." And why would he think to fire at it? I guess I just wouldn't consider that, but I would consider it in a defensive situation, I think. But I wouldn't just go out there with the aim to try and shoot this thing down. I don't know, maybe you think it's hostile. But he said again, just like the first F4, whenever he got close to it, so within 25 nautical miles, his radio communications started becoming garbled and his weapons were jammed. So I'm not really sure what he means by weapon was jammed if they had it on the radar, but normally you have to have a radar lock to actually fire a radar weapon. Not always, but I think it's a very good idea. So maybe that's the issue. They couldn't get a radar lock on it. That's why they couldn't actually shoot the weapons. But either way, he's having the same issues. Jafari continues. All of a sudden, it jumped back to 27 miles in an instant from 25 miles. I wondered what it was. I was still seeing that giant, brilliant diamond shape with pulsating, colored lights. Then I was startled by a round object which came out of the primary object and started coming straight toward me at a high rate of speed, almost as if it were a missile. Imagine a brightly lit moon coming out over the horizon. That's what it looked like. I was really scared because I thought that maybe they had some kind of projectile toward me. I had 8 missiles on board, 4 operated by radar and 4 heat-seeking ones. The radar was locked onto the larger diamond object, and I had to make a very fast decision as to what to do. Okay, so he says here that the radar was locked on, so they got a valid lock-on, which we heard in the Nimitz engagement. They were not able to get a valid lock-on with the F-18 onto the Tic Tac. So here he says they had a valid lock, so he should have been able to shoot a radar missile. He should have been able to shoot one. Jafari continues, I realized that if this moon-like second thing was a missile, it would have some heat associated with it. So I selected an AIM-9 heat-seeking missile to fire at it. I attempted to fire and looked at the panel to confirm my selection of the missile. Suddenly, nothing was working. The weapons control panel was out, and I lost all the instruments and the radio. The indicator calls were spinning around randomly, and the instruments were fluctuating. At this point, I was even more frightened. Couldn't communicate with the tower, and had to scream to talk to my backseater through the cockpit. I thought, if it gets closer to me than 4 miles, I will have to eject before impact to avoid being in the area of the explosion. To prevent this, I had to turn. So I made a shallow turn to the left to avoid being impacted by the object heading towards us, which was in sight at my 4 o'clock position. It came about 4 or 5 miles from our aircraft, and then it stopped there at the 4 o'clock position. I looked out on my left side briefly to find out where I was over the ground. A second later, when I looked back, the object wasn't there. I said, oh my God, and Lieutenant Demirian replied, sir, it's at 7 o'clock. I looked back at 7 o'clock, and there it was. I once again saw the main thing up there, too, and then the smaller object flew gently underneath it and rejoined the primary one. This all happened quickly. I didn't know what to think, but in a few seconds, another one came out. It started circling around us. Once again, all the instruments went out and the radio was garbled. Then when it moved away, everything became operational again, and all the equipment worked fine. This one, too, seemed sort of like the moon, a round, bright light. I reported to the tower. General Yousefi was listening on the line, and the operator said, the order is to come back. We started to head toward the military airbase, and then I noticed that one of these objects was following us on our left side during the descent. I reported this to the base. As I made a turn for the final approach, I saw another object right ahead of me. I called the tower and asked, I have traffic ahead of me. What is it? He said, we have no traffic. I said, I'm looking at it right now. It's at my 12 o'clock position at a low altitude. He still insisted that I didn't have any traffic, but there it was. This time, looking like a thin rectangle with a light at each end and one in the middle. It was coming toward me, but when I started turning left for the landing, I lost sight of it. My backseater kept watching and said, as you were turning, I could see a round dome over it with a dim light inside of it. I put the ears down and focused on making my approach to the base, distracted and worried by all these things happening around me, but it still wasn't over. I looked to my left side and I saw the primary diamond-shaped thing up there and another bright object come out of it and headed directly toward the ground. I thought I would see a huge explosion any moment when it hit, but that did not happen. It seemed to slow down and land gently on the ground, radiating a high, bright light, so bright that I could see the sands on the ground from that far, about 15 miles. I reported it to the tower, and they said that they saw it too. Now the general, still listening in, ordered me to approach and take a look, so I retracted the gear and the flaps and turned the aircraft. They told me to go above it to see if I could see what it was. As soon as I got about 4 or 5 miles from it, once again the radio was garbled and the panel went out. It was the same exact thing all over again. I tried to get out of that area because they couldn't hear me on the radio, and I told them, this happens every time I get close to these things. I thought I really shouldn't have gone there, but since it was an order, I did it. Finally, the general said, okay, come back and land. We could hear emergency squawk coming from the location where the object had landed on the ground. A squawk sounds like the beeping from an ambulance or a police car, and its purpose is to help find people when they have ejected from an airplane, or if there's a crash landing. It's a locator tone that says, I'm here. In this case, the squawking from the UFO was reported by some civil airliners nearby. After landing, I went to the command post, and then we went to check in with the tower. They said the main thing in the sky had just disappeared, suddenly, in an instant. Okay, so that's a third time he actually approaches, and he has the same weird electromagnetic effects. And this time, the larger object put down a small light that went down to the ground. and he could see from 15 miles away, actually, it emitting light over the whole ground. Again, I don't know what debunkers say that is, just some sort of misunderstanding. Again, you had two people that saw it up in the air. And the squawking, yeah, that's normally in the seat. We call it a beacon. So when you eject, there's actually going to be a beacon that sends out a very high pitch whop, 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 whop. And you can direction find, locate onto that. You know, you're going to deactivate it if you go into enemy territory. But if you're just in training, then that thing automatically goes off. So it will be responding, and it's these beacons that would sometimes go off on the base just accidentally. The life support crew or someone would actually accidentally set one off. But if you have a real crash now, you're going to hear that beacon. So that's would have been freaking everyone out. They end up going to the site the next day, I believe, going out to the site, doing the radiation readings. There was no radiation readings at the site, but the beacon was still going off. And they asked local people nearby if they saw or heard anything, and they just said they heard some noise that night, but that was it. So final point on this is that the U.S. did actually investigate it. A group of scientists questioned us over a period of time, but it was all on paper, in letters sent to headquarters, and not in person. They called me in repeatedly from the base, and I would go to headquarters and read the papers and answer more questions again and again. Iranian officials examined and tested the two F-4s for radioactivity and found none. Later, a once classified memo from the Defense Intelligence Agency written by Lieutenant Colonel Moy, whom I had tried to find after the briefing, was released in America through the Freedom of Information Act. It documented the event in great detail for over 3 pages, and it was sent to the NSA, the White House, and the CIA. Another document, dated October 12, 1976, by Major Colonel Evans, provided an assessment of the case for the DIA. It said that this case is a classic, which meets all the criteria necessary for a valid study of the UFO phenomenon. This shows the U.S. government took this information very seriously, and it was clear to me at the time that this information was being kept secret there. But within a relatively short time, these documents were released. There's likely additional material sitting in U.S. government files, but no one has told me anything more. To this day, I don't know what I saw, but for sure it was not an aircraft. It was not a flying object that human beings on Earth can make. It moved way too fast. Imagine I was looking at it about 70 miles out, and it jumped all of a sudden 10 degrees to my right. This 10 degrees represented about 6.7 miles per moment. And I don't say per second because it was much less than a second. Now you try to calculate the speed it would take for it to move from a stationary position to this second point. This needed very, very high level technology. Also, it was able to shut down my missile and instruments somehow. Where it came from, I don't know. And I can't doubt what happened. It wasn't only me, the pilot in my backseat, the 2 pilots in the first aircraft, the men in the tower, people from headquarters, General Yousefi, who was on duty in the Air Force Command Post. They all saw it. Many people were concerned about us on the ground, and we also captured it on radar from our cockpit. Nobody can say I imagined it. The radar was locked on the object and could determine its size because we practiced refueling 707 tankers, and the return of the UFO on radar indicated they were about the same size. Okay, so just an amazing account there. Check out the full detailed account as well as many others in Leslie Kean's amazing book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, Government Officials Go on the Record. But that is not the only crazy event that happened in Iran. Let's check out the next one. So if you didn't know, Iran, yes, has F-4s, which is amazing. These are all the countries. The red is who had F-4s, right? But blue is who has F-4s still. And you see Greece, Turkey, Iran, and South Korea, of all nations, still has F-4s. But very few countries, I think Iran may be the only one, that has F-14s. But now we fast forward to 2004 nuclear site interaction. So in 2004, UFO encounters took on a new level as they began to appear over Iran's nuclear facilities, particularly the Kandab heavy water reactor and Bushehr. Over these strategic locations, Iranian pilots reported seeing glowing objects exhibiting astonishing flight characteristics such as hovering, rapid acceleration, and jamming of radar and navigation systems, so similar to what we heard from 1976. The Iranian Air Force deployed multiple F-4E Phantoms and F-14A Tomcats to intercept these unidentified objects. On October 28, 2004, during a routine patrol over the Arak heavy water reactor, an F-14 pilot and his radar intercept officer observed a luminous object hovering near the facility. The object emitted a bright blue light and moved with unprecedented speed and agility, easily evading the interceptor. We tried to get a lock on it, but every time we came close, our systems malfunctioned. It was as if the object knew exactly how to evade our radars and disrupt our electronics. So the F4 radar should be better than the F-14 radar, but unknown. Despite several engagements, the Iranian pilots were unable to successfully intercept or identify the objects. The luminous UFOs were reported to have capabilities far beyond any known drone technology at the time, leading to speculation that these could be highly advanced reconnaissance UAVs operated by foreign powers or something even more mysterious. So they can always blame it on America, right? The great white Satan. But how can we have those capabilities? The 2004 incidents are particularly compelling because they suggest a direct link between UFO sightings and Iran's nuclear sites. This raises significant questions about the intentions and origins of these objects. The Iranian Air Force was unable to successfully engage these objects, and their presence remains a mystery. Finally, let's go to the 2012 explosive encounter. So the most alarming incident occurred on January 26, 2012. An Iranian F-14 Tomcat was scrambled at night to intercept another luminous object over a nuclear facility. As the jet approached the object, it mysteriously exploded in mid-air, killing both crew members. This event led to intense speculation that the UFO might have had defensive capabilities that contributed to the jet's destruction. The object was reported to have flown at hypersonic speeds up to Mach 10 and had the ability to hover and emit a blue light. Again, a blue light. These characteristics are beyond current known drone capabilities, leading some to believe these were not merely advanced U.S. drones, but something else entirely. In another instance, Iranian fighter jets attempted to intercept what they believed to be a CIA drone near the Natanz nuclear facility. The objects, described as glowing and capable of evading advanced military jets, left the Iranian pilots again baffled and concerned about their true nature and origin. While some suggest these could be secret U.S. aircraft, the technological gap is significant. The ability to hover, jam electronics, reach such high speeds, instantaneous acceleration, no sonic booms, to me suggests an origin that is still unknown. This incident further cements the mysterious connection between UFO sightings and Iran's nuclear sites, raising more questions than answers. Sources come from National Interest and Aviationist. These three incidents paint a fascinating and unsettling picture of UFO interactions with military aircraft, the final one actually exploding, especially in the context of nuclear facilities. Whether these objects are advanced human-made drones or something else still remains a mystery. I don't see how they could be super advanced human-made drones. What is clear, however, is that they represent a significant challenge to national security and aviation, right? Obviously, our aircraft cannot even get close to these things, so pretty hard to engage them or certainly shoot them down. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. It really helps, and it's free. Consider subscribing to get future notifications of when I release videos. And you might like this video. If you want to support the channel, join these great people over here, get exclusive bonus content, then click this button here, patreon.com/Chris Slato, or become a YouTube member. If you want to continue the discussion, go to UAP Society Discord. Links are all in the description. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.